Hello, underachievers. So, when you hear the name Joe Rogan, what word specifically comes to mind?
No, I'm gonna pass on that one.
For me personally, I would say meathead. Conspiracy theorist, perhaps. The biggest thing, maybe for me right now, is the fact that he was kind of part of that whole right-wing grifter podcast group that helped you-know-who get elected into presidency. If you don't know who he is, as I said, he's a right-wing grifter. He has lots of people guest on his podcast. They can be people from the left, people from the right. There's a lot of people that Joe Rogan has on his podcast that should not be given a voice. Their mouths should be zipped shut. But in today's video, Joe Rogan is the one who should be zipped shut, which I'm sure this will not be the first example of that happening ever. I will not lie to you. I do have a soft spot for men of Joe Rogan's age. Not in a sexual way, in the slightest. He mostly just reminds me of my dad and my dad's friends, and my dad means well and has feelings. So when I see a man of a similar age say something, I sort of have this sense of empathy. I feel like I'm losing a lot of that with Joe Rogan and with a lot of people like that nowadays. So in my personal opinion, obviously Joe Rogan is not the type of person that I would listen to. I've seen clips over the years, especially I guess since the 2020s, since COVID happened. A lot of what he says is quite interesting. I don't think he's a particularly smart man. I think a lot of what he does is he gets people that sound smart on his podcast, and he kind of just nods and doesn't really push back on any of the conspiracy shit, which is obviously a big problem. I was of the opinion that, Joe Rogan was a little bit more normal about trans people. I know people are getting less and less normal about trans people, so this was eventually going to come, especially with the people that he surrounds himself with. This is a little clip called Joe Rogan Snaps talking about trans people issues with Steve-O. If you don't know who Steve-O is, he is a member of Jackass, a group of people that purposely hurt themselves for entertainment. Seems like a nice guy, but I guess we'll figure out by the end of that what he thinks about trans people nowadays.
I'm buying groceries in the supermarket in LA, and the person ringing me up on the cash register is seems pretty evidently transgender.
There's not a good way to express that sentiment. Even as a trans person, I feel like when I run into somebody or I walk past somebody in public that look, I'm trans, I know how to clock trans people. Gaydar exist, I understand transdar exists. I also understand that most cis people actually don't know what they're talking about when it comes to it. What did he say? Evidently transgender? I like that one. I'll be using that from now on.
They described to me a level of oppression that genuinely broke my heart. They said, hey, let me tell you, I am not allowed to use the bathroom at my own place of work. We've got politics.
That's not true.
This is where I expected Steve-O to be in terms of trans stuff. I know that he hangs out with queer people, he hangs out with gay people, he hangs out with trans people. He's always seemed like a good guy to me. He's a vegan. Not that that means that he can't commit heinous crimes. And not that he has committed heinous crimes. He probably has, in the name of Jackass. But the point is, this is the type of person that I would like to be on the Joe Rogan podcast. Somebody that can be slightly normal about trans people. Somebody that clearly, right now, this man is displaying empathy. Just Joe immediately being that's not true in reference to trans people not being able to use the toilet in their workplace. That would be where I immediately would fact check specifically what Joe Rogan said, and so far this is the only thing that he said. Even in the UK nowadays, they've been passing new legislation that means that the newest update for trans people in the UK is that they can use, if they're a trans woman, they can use the women's bathroom.
The bathroom, yeah. For bets.
This is for the bet. If you're a trans woman in the UK, you now can use public toilets for women, but you cannot use the women's toilet in your place of work. I genuinely have sat down and tried to maybe understand a slither of information about why trans women would be a risk at work and not any other situation, but I haven't come up with it. But we know it's much worse in the US. In Kansas, they're taking trans people's driver's licenses away from them because they're apparently fraudulent. They're already taking away trans people's healthcare. It is much worse over there than it is here. But yeah, what does Joe Rogan have to say about that not being true?
They're just not allowed to use the bathroom. It doesn't align with their biological sex.
Okay.
But you gotta realize, they're not all, listen.
As a trans person that's been on the internet, that's been publicly trans, let's guess in the comments, what do you think he's gonna follow this with? Because usually when I hear this line of argument, it's yeah, there are some normal trans people that are genuinely transgender. They have the dysphoria, they do want to kill themselves. And I would say that those trans people, they're good, they're real, but there are people that aren't actually transgender, that are actually predators. They're perverts. They want to go into the women's bathroom because of sexual reasons. I feel like maybe it wouldn't be that extreme what he's saying. I've not seen the clip. Where is he going with it?
I think there's people that feel like they are in the wrong biological sex.
Sure.
Right? But there's also people that are perverts.
He just straight up just called them perverts. Okay.
And they have a thing called autogynephilia.
Okay, so autogynephilia before Joe Rogan probably explains it badly, is the idea that there are some people that identify either as trans women or that, you know, live their lives like a trans woman, maybe medically transitioned, but they don't actually identify with being a woman. They purely get sexual gratification from the idea of being a woman, in the sense that, like, it's not based on their identity and their true feelings and their true soul and that kind of stuff. It's mostly just based on, like, being perverse. It's kind of whittled down in the right-wing media to some sort of, like, kink rather than an actual identity. This is usually a term that's mostly weaponized against trans women. There is, like, the opposite term for trans men, but usually the arguments by the right wing are that trans women are, you know, dangerous perverts and trans men are just like lost lesbians who are hurt in some way.
And what that is they get a turn on by pretending to be a woman, and they're creeps. And so you give them a Willy Wonka golden ticket to go into the women's locker room and the women's bathroom and stare at women and pretend you're a woman when you're just a crazy man and you're actually into women.
It's just, this is like the big, oh my god. He's in the exact age range to be doing the big scary parent thing. Like, don't go out into the world. There are dangerous people that want you dead. And look, you live in America. I understand the concern. The idea of being scared of trans people as a whole, because there are some people that absolutely, yes, I'm not arguing that there aren't people that, you know, will use any opportunity to their advantage to get what they want in terms of, like, abusing people. As a tale as old as time. That's not specific to trans people, though, and trying to conflate being trans with that kind of thing is just harmful in the sense that, like, it would be harmful to equate any demographic of people to that sort of pervert when it's such a small population of them. It's the same sort of argument that's been used against, like, every sort of demographic since the beginning of time, just for fear-mongering. This is not new. It's just increasingly common for trans people to experience.
Okay.
That's real too, man.
I don't doubt that that's real, and I know that it's a super complex, nuanced thing. And
but here's what's not complex.
The fact that he's not even letting Steve-O talk.
But here's what's not complex. What is your chromosomes?
That is specifically complex. There's a similar amount of ginger people as there are intersex people, which, if you don't know what being intersex is, it is essentially an umbrella term for a group of people that have variation in their natural sex characteristics. For example, you could be biologically appearing female, but you could have male chromosomes, male gonads, internal stuff going on. That sort of thing is as common almost as being ginger. So to say that sex and like chromosomes aren't complex is just denying biological fact, which is something that they always accuse us of.
This is the same thing for competing. Right. All these mental gymnastics that seemingly intelligent people do to justify biological males competing with females.
I don't think anybody's
It's the same thing.
He's like, there's this kind of concept that I don't understand that like seemingly intelligent people seem to get that doesn't make any sense to me. It always comes back to trans women in sport. Nobody really gives a shit about trans men in sport unless they want to force them to compete with females and then get mad about the fact that it looks like, you know, a biological male is competing with biological female. Chromosomes are complicated, hormones are complicated. You could technically be like biologically male, indistinguishable from blood tests from the amount of hormone levels that you have, and your chromosomes could say something completely different. And in terms of like sport, and especially competitive sport, like it kind of runs on the idea that some people have like natural innate biological differences that just make them better at sport. Like Michael Phelps's wingspan is too f***ing long. That man is not a human being, but he swims real fast and he's got plenty of medals from it. Any time that I've spoken to any trans woman before being on estrogen and afterwards, their body composition completely different. But this is not what this video is about. I don't want to go into that because it's f***ing boring and overspoken about. But of course, it's something that he's bringing up.
I don't think anybody's
It's the
arguing
same
that.
thing.
Right.
It's the same thing.
It's not the same thing. How is it the same thing? If you let trans women into the women's bathrooms, then they're taller and they have longer arms. So, you know, if they're really bursting and the poor cis women are in line, the trans woman can just reach open the cubicle and get in first. Biological advantage to piss quicker. Like, what do you mean? How is it the same thing? Just like letting trans people go to the toilets. A lot of the time, like these people will be like, oh, you know, it's not complicated. If you're born a guy, go into the men's bathroom. Trans women are way more likely to be victims of violence than people that actually commit violence. So all you're doing when you make trans women go to the men's bathroom and vice versa with trans men, you're just putting them at risk and you're not actually helping anybody, because if somebody is a predator and wants to go into the women's bathroom to abuse somebody, they're gonna do it regardless of whether or not they're identifying as a woman.
Right.
And especially as speaking as a man who has daughters, Like, there are creeps.
I love that, like, men experience empathy for the first time when they have daughters. It's like these type of men have never considered women having experiences and feelings outside of the experiences that men have until they've had women of their own. But it's also such a man thing to use your knowledge of sexism through your family to sort of oppress other sorts of women because they're the types of women that you don't want anything to do with.
And if you give a creep, and I'm not saying all trans people are creeps.
Right.
Just most of them.
But a lot of these people that are in trouble for going into women's bathrooms dressed as a woman with a fucking beard and a heart on.
They just kind of run with this, like, sort of story that they've created in their head about trans people. It's like the trans boogeyman. What is the ratio of trans women just going into the toilet just to use the toilet, and they're probably quite scared to do it because of people like you? What is the ratio of people like that to the ratio of people that, like, apparently wear dresses and have beards and then go into the bathroom with a heart on? Like, I would love to see some data about that, because the thing about Joe Rogan is he kind of just says stuff. He lets his guests just say stuff. He doesn't fact check any of it. And because some of the people that watch... Okay, I'm not going to say all Joe Rogan fans are stupid, because, like, I'd be doing the same thing that he's doing. Not all Joe Rogan fans are stupid. But what I will say is that, like, this type of influencing, especially since 2020 and, you know, where disinformation around COVID and everything got real big, this is the sort of content that attracts the type of people that kind of want to be told how to think. If you're not fact-checking the bullshit like that people are spreading, then it's just gonna spread like wildfire. People like Joe Rogan are the reason that bigotry in this form kind of just explodes around the world. Like, he is, you know, not even indirectly, he is sort of directly responsible for the rise in this sort of rhetoric. I also feel like Joe Rogan specifically, and like probably a lot of his audience, are the type of people that like already have a set opinion, and they look purely for people that will parrot their opinion back to them because they don't actually have to reflect or, you know, think of any ideas that they have in their head that conflict with reality.
They're creeps.
Right, okay.
They're crazy men. And these crazy men, their entire life, they would get beaten up for that. And now all of a sudden, they have to be accepted.
That is wild. Bring back beating men. If a couple of trans women accidentally slip under the radar with that, then so be it. My daughters need to be safe. Steve-O does not want to talk about this.
It's men that are the problem. No one gives a fuck about trans men going into the men's bathroom.
He doesn't even realize that he's doing it. It's not anybody but men that are the problem, which by definition means that trans men are not the problem because they're not men. It's such a irritating sort of rhetoric to argue because it is like, from an outside perspective, if you don't really know any trans people, you don't actually know the data that reflects that trans women and trans men and trans people in general are just more likely to be victims of assault, of abuse in every given situation than they are to, you know, commit that sort of crime. And you're using like a small minority of people that, you know, realistically probably aren't trans if they are following the definition of what he's saying they are, if they're just men that are predators that want to access women's bathrooms. They don't count as trans people. But just the fact that he was like, yeah, no one gives a about trans men. They do. They absolutely do, and he's so not clued up about trans people that he doesn't even realize that. Like, the amount of trans men that I know that have beards, that look more masculine than a lot of cis people that I know, that if they were seen in the women's bathroom, they would be beaten the f up by whatever women are in there. There are so many instances of trans men, either, you know, in the US, actually being arrested for going into the women's bathroom, which is, you know, where they're supposed to be, according to people like Joe Rogan. There are so many instances of trans men having similar issues with as trans women regarding bathrooms. It's just insane to me that, like, he doesn't seem to understand what he's saying. It's not insane to me. This is who I thought Joe Rogan was.
Oh, a girl's gonna next to you? Or what is she gonna do? She's gonna pee out of a funnel? What is she gonna do?
So he is literally just calling trans men she. I feel like he would have at least, like, tried to respect pronouns, but even for, like, a metaphorical trans person, he's not even bothering to gender them correctly. But it's the same f***ing argument. What are the trans women gonna do? Pee? He's just showing this, like, clear display of cognitive dissonance where he can understand why trans men would want to just go into the bathroom to use the toilet. But for trans women, it's suddenly different because he's painted them all with this brush that they're, like, predators in some way. I do just want to say, there is absolutely no study, no data that suggests that trans women are more likely to commit crimes in bathrooms than any other type type of woman. Like, there is absolutely no data that suggests that.
You can't say you're not allowed to use the bathroom where you work. That's not true. You're just not allowed to use the women's room where other women are in there because you're not a woman.
So what you're doing then is forcing trans women to use the bathroom with men, which is, you know, statistically something that will make them more likely to experience abuse and violence. It's also like this like bioessentialist thing. It's the idea of anybody that has a penis is like inherently violent, which is really funny because like this is an opinion and a view and a belief that is held both by right-wing transphobic bigots that like, you know, I don't think Joe Rogan hates all gay people. I don't think he hates all LGBT people. He clearly just has a thing against trans people. But these are views that are held by the right wing, but also held, you know, by radical feminists, which I will not say are left wing, but they also have the view that like if you're a man, and if you're a man, it's because you were born a man. It doesn't matter if you're a trans man because trans men aren't men, in the same way that Joe Rogan believes that. Very similar beliefs. They believe that, you know, men are inherently violent. I have been a part of several TERF Facebook groups who have felt like they're in the safety and comfort of their own bubble. They have spoken about the fact that they wish that they had girl babies and not boy babies and how much they resent their sons because they're going to grow up to be monsters. So just a really fun fact there that he's kind of sort of arguing the same bullshit that TERFs are arguing, but just from a different perspective.
And I know you wish you were a woman or whatever's going on,
okay.
But you're
you
not.
Know what? You make a very, very good point.
Steve-O is kind of playing the role of like apprehensive, like slightly anxious, wants to be an ally kind of guy, but doesn't really have the balls to say it, which, you know, is disappointing to see. It's not surprising to see because this is the sort of thing that like people who tentatively call themselves allies will do. They'll kind of back down if they hear somebody have a louder voice when it comes to trans people. But just for reference, if you're not trans and you're seeing something like this, you hear this kind of thing, maybe fight back a little bit more.
Talk to most women about this. And it's, unless they're insanely captured by this woke ideology where they can't see reality and the fact that perverts are still a real fucking thing.
Also, sorry, speak to most women about this. Every single study that's come out about most women and their views on trans people in studies that don't just take the demographic of right-wing and transphobic women into account. Women are by far one of the most trans-supportive demographics.
They've given loopholes. Like, there's men in prison. I think it's like 47 biological males in California are housed in women's prisons. Some of them are sex offenders.
They're in jail, Joe. They've committed crimes.
There's a guy in Canada that they had to pay for his boob job while he was in jail for being a sex offender, and they put him in a women's prison. Yeah.
I'm not arguing with
I think that's 3 or 4 times now that he said, hey, I'm not arguing that.
There's men who have sexually assaulted and raped women in prison that are pretending to be women with functional
It is way more perverted to give this much attention, both to trans women in real life, real ones that exist, but also metaphorical women. It is so weird and perverse to pay that much attention to their genitals. That is the kind of thing that you're complaining about them doing, but all you're thinking about is their
Okay, well then I'll land on this.
Do you know who's killed more people than ICE this year? Trans shooters.
What? Straight up here, we're just gonna cut that straight. Trans shooters, trans school shooters, whatever, have not killed more people than ICE. I was doing a bit of Googling before this, but there is literally an entire Wikipedia page dedicated to misinformation about violence by transgender people. In the 2020s, right-wing politicians and commentators, Joe Rogan, have falsely claimed that transgender people commit disproportionately higher rates of violence, such as mass shootings or terrorist attacks. It is just not true. And it is a step further than calling trans people perverts and like dangerous predators in the sense of like sexual abuse. Claiming that trans people are not only dangerous in terms of being like perverts and like being sexually abusive, saying that they're dangerous in the sense that they will kill people puts trans people in more danger than they're already in. And there's already Trump talking about like taking firearms off of trans people, just considering it because apparently they're so violent, when there is not any data or any source or any like long-term study or anything like that that actually suggests that being true. It's just not true. It's just something that the right-wing media have decided to run with, and because a lot of their audience don't feel the need to fact check them, they'll just believe it.
Do you know the majority of these high school shootings have been transgender people?
Oh my god. Oh my god. They literally use the idea that you can be trans just by identifying it to their advantage, in the sense that they were like, they'll probably see a school shooter, a boy, a teenage boy, with maybe longer hair and an earring, maybe a bit of eyeliner, and then they will identify him as trans for their own benefit. I mean, not to bring up Charlie Kirk, but I feel like now is good of a time as any. When Charlie Kirk was shot, the media immediately went to the fact that the shooter was somehow transgender. And when the shooter wasn't transgender, they were playing along with the fact that the shooter's partner was transgender, who, by the way, knew nothing about what was going on. But they immediately just jumped to trans people. It's not even that when they hear about trans people, they equate it to violence. It's that when they hear violence, they equate it to trans people. For no good reason.
I did not know that.
Yeah. How many of them? There was one recently, and
just Steve-O laughing uncomfortably. Well, there was one recently. I don't remember the name, but there was one, and that's more than none.
I've seen it on a couple posts. I don't know how widespread, but you know, I am in
right-wing
media, so.
You know why? Because they're giving them psych medications, they're giving them a bunch of crazy hormones, and a lot of them probably have mental struggles already.
Psych medications? Okay. Look, we know that they're not scared of trans men. They're only scared of trans women. If we're talking about hormones that drive people crazy enough that they get violent, we've seen enough right-wing commentators take steroids and go on testosterone and just like their entire faces turn red with rage at the slightest of inconvenience. Estrogen is not the hormone that's gonna drive you crazy and start shooting people. It just doesn't make sense.
And they're ostracized from society.
Ooh!
And who set that system up?
Fill in the blank, and then they're empowered by thinking that the world has done something bad to them.
So he's essentially saying society shits on them, and then the next sentence saying that that is somehow empowering. Because yes, socio-political oppression, very empowering.
And that there's like a genocide against trans people, and they attack J.K. Rowling, and they attack all these people.
J.K. Rowling is the reason that the UK has gone so crazy with anti-trans laws, because the money that she gets from Harry Potter merchandise, which thank you by the way if you buy any of that, the money that J.K. Rowling earns from Harry Potter, she has explicitly said she has used in order to fight for anti-trans legislation. Like, she's done it in the UK. She donated £70,000 to the anti-trans group that, you know, f***ed around with trans people so much in the last 2 years in terms of, like, changing legislation and terminology. She has done so much more damage in ways that, like, will reflect badly on trans people for the next 5 years, probably in the UK. Yeah, so I will say, hey, J.K. Rowling, you're a piece of shit. You make people's lives harder. You are responsible for trans people having a harder time.
Martina Navratilova, who's like a famous lesbian, for being a bigot because she doesn't want biological men competing with women in tennis. It's nuts, man.
It is nuts. So that got me riled up. That bothered me more than I thought it would. I am a little bit surprised, to be completely honest. Obviously, stupidly enough. Obviously, I shouldn't be surprised. I know he's brought terrible people onto his podcast, but he's a close age to my dad, so I thought maybe he had feelings like my dad. So that's the end of the video. Let me know your thoughts. Have a good day, Odo. See you later, losers. Goodbye. Thank you so much for continuing watching after I said goodbye. So I have a Patreon, and if you sign up to the tier of Backstage Ghoul, I will do something special for you at the end of every YouTube video. Haley Bailey, Bo Bailey, for Nana Fala, for Failey, Shally Bali, Bo Bali, for Nana Fala, for Fali, Chris, Bo Bis, Banana Fana, for Fit, Cody Bodie, Bo Banner, for Nana Fana, for 40. There's your thank you song.